Hey, welcome to today's Awesome Marriage Podcast. I have a very special guest today, Melanie Shankle. She is joining me. She's the New York Times best-selling author of Sparkly Green Earrings, The Antelope in the Living Room, Nobody's Cuter Than You, and a new book, which we're going to talk a lot about, Let Here Be Dragons, Treading the Deep Waters of Motherhood, Mean Girls, and Generational Trauma. Melanie speaks at events all over the country. She's co-host of the wildly popular podcast, The Big Boocast. Most importantly, she's married to her husband, Perry. They're the parents to their daughter, Caroline. They live in San Antonio, Texas. Let's go to the studio right now so you can meet Melanie. Well, Melanie, welcome to the Awesome Marriage Podcast. Thank you for being with us today. I'm excited about this interview. I've been looking forward to it. I know you've been a busy lady lately, so I'm glad we finally got time to get together.
Me too. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to have this conversation and happy to be on the show.
Oh, thanks so much. So let's kind of start in about the new book. How hard was it for you to write this book?
You know, it's funny because when I first started writing it, I thought, well, this isn't going to be that hard. You know, you kind of feel like I've lived through it. I've dealt with all of it. I'm on the other side of it. But
Sure.
I think once I started, I sent an early draft to one of my dear friends. She's actually my podcast partner. And I had her read an early draft. And she was like, hey, your writing is beautiful, but it feels like you're writing a novel about World War II. Like, here are some bad things that happened from a long distance. And she said, I think you're going to have to dig into your feelings and emotions and bring all those things back up for this book to be what you want it to be. And so once I started that process, it became significantly harder to write the book.
Yeah. Isn't it nice, though, to have friends that will tell us the truth sometimes?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you got to have your truth tellers.
You do, even though you think, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But you've got them in there. So you talk a lot about generational trauma. For people that might not really understand that, let's talk about what that really means, what it is.
I mean, in my understanding, you know, just as a non-clinical person, it's just, you know, anything that you have had in your past, in your background, in your family line that has caused you to not be able to emotionally grow the way that God intended for you to, that has caused you to have some wounds and some issues that you've had. And I was actually just talking to a friend about this yesterday, where I was like, you know, that can go from really traumatic to sometimes just, it can be as simple as if your parents weren't there for you emotionally in the way that parents are supposed to be there, that can cause trauma, you know? So I think there's different levels of what that looks like in people's life.
I think it does too. And I think you're right. It's that, and especially for a child that maybe the parents aren't there and how they interpret it at that time. And, you know, that well, I don't care about me or whatever then if you never work through that,
yeah,
then you keep that thought in the back of your mind, and it does affect you more and more. And then, you know, I've had people I've worked with in counseling that say, well, how can this guy I want to marry really love me and how can I be sure he's going to be there because my parents weren't?
Yeah.
And if they didn't love me that way, then how can this guy? So yeah, that makes so much sense. How there's things that we may not see as big, but they become big.
They do become big. Yeah, because it creates, do you have trust issues? Do you have, you know, issues letting people in? Are you know, for me, one of my things is I always just deflected everything with humor because I didn't want to feel anything too deeply. And, you know, you have all these ways that you learn to cope that seem normal sometimes until you try to get in a new relationship or, you know, do something better. And you're like, oh, that's not really the healthiest way to deal with that, you know?
I think it's interesting you said humor, because I think when we deal with it, humor, nobody really picks up on anything. If you go around sad or depressed all the time, people may say, what's wrong with you? But humor kind of covers it up, doesn't it?
It really does. I mean, you think about, I feel like it was an eye-opening thing. I mean, how long has it been? 10 years ago that Robin Williams, the comedian, took his life, and everybody was so shocked by that. And I thought, you just don't know the different ways people choose to deflect their pain and what they're going through. You know, and I always say one of the good things about a hard childhood is it did make me funny. I mean, it gave me a good sense of humor. So
you got a silver lining in there.
That's it.
Yeah, that's true. And that's so true. I think we see that with other people that we don't really know. Well, we don't really know what's going on with anybody that we don't really have a relationship with. And sometimes we don't really know what's going on. So it makes total sense. So you witnessed firsthand your mom navigating unhealthy relationship with the men in her life and experienced the trauma that she carried and how that affected you and your sister. did you carry that trauma with you in your relationships and with friends and with family? How did that
Oh,
play out?
for sure. I mean, I think for me, first of all, I never got to see a healthy relationship. So I didn't know when I started to date and all of those things, I didn't really know what a healthy relationship should
Yeah.
look like. What does it look like to have a supportive partner? What does it look like to have somebody who builds you up in an encouraging way? And I think when you're told, like I was by my mom, all the ways that I was a failure and I wasn't good enough. I entered into everything feeling like I had to earn people's love or I had to be impossibly charming or accommodating. Otherwise, people weren't going to like me. I didn't feel like my feelings mattered or anybody would listen. And so you take all of those into your
Yeah.
friendships, into your dating relationships, because it's just been so ingrained in you that it's all you know.
Yeah. Did you ever feel like you could earn somebody's love, or did you feel like I always just kept falling short, or my mom was right?
I think for a long time, I always felt like I'm never going to be good enough.
Yeah.
And I think even if I kind of went through it, I would feel a little bit like I always lived with maybe some imposter syndrome where I thought
Yeah.
if people knew who I really was,
Yeah.
they wouldn't like me. Like the only reason they like me right now is they don't really know me.
Yeah. So how did that play out in dating?
I mean, I think I was in, I say my first serious boyfriend when I was, in high school, a junior in high school. I ended up dating somebody who was I look back and I'm like, oh, he was my mom in another form. I
Wow.
mean, he was narcissistic. It was all about him. He would tear me down and then tell me he didn't mean it. And that all felt like love to me because he would, be like, I can't live without you. But then he would find ways to like push me away or to alienate me. And so it was just this really unhealthy dynamic, but I hadn't seen my mom, her dating relationships were so unhealthy.
Yeah.
And so, I always say that, I mean, as a kid, I loved the movie Urban Cowboy, and I thought Bud and Sissy were a healthy relationship, and they were not. That was not a good example
Right.
of a healthy relationship, but I didn't even know what that was supposed to look like. So I took that into my dating. And then in college, I had an engagement to a guy I never should have been engaged to. And it was not a healthy relationship. And we ended up, by the grace of God, broke that off and the marriage didn't happen. But it took a lot of Christ healing in me for me to realize what I deserved in terms of being loved and valued and lifted up in a relationship.
Yeah. That's so interesting because I think we want to be loved, but like you didn't really know what that looked like even.
No, I didn't. And I didn't really even know how to let somebody in. And I didn't know how to let somebody know my true self. I didn't know how to be honest and upfront. And because I just always lived with this, if they really knew me, they wouldn't really
Yeah.
like me.
And so then it's almost like you're almost doomed to failure with no matter what, right? And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah. It's painful to realize the way you felt about Caroline was completely different than how your mom felt about you. What way? How
Hmm.
did that propel you toward being a healthier mother for Caroline? Because you've broken a cycle.
Yeah.
You
And
stopped something.
well, and it's interesting because I think even before I had Caroline, my daughter, I knew there were things I was going to want to do different. Like by that time I had grown enough. I had, done a lot of work. I feel like God had really worked in my heart. And so I was very aware of their cycles that need to be broken. But I think you don't really know exactly what that's going to look like or how you're going to do it till it happens.
Sure.
And it was so clear to me, I knew that there was all this dysfunction between my mom and I, but once I became a mom and I had Caroline, I was like, oh, this is how a mother is supposed to feel about her child. Like just this, I would die for you. I would do
Yeah.
anything for you. And I was like, my mom never felt that way about me. I mean, there was always just this jealousy, this competition, this pushing me away. It just always was so toxic. And so it was a lot of prayer. I mean, it was a lot of healing and it was
Sure.
a lot of just knowing. I think sometimes when you've come from something, I mean, I almost think because of what I came from, in a way, it made me a more intentional mom than maybe I would have been
Mm-hmm.
had I not come from that background, because I did have a really clear view of what I didn't want to be. And sometimes I think the best way to figure out who you want to be is to know clearly what you absolutely don't want to be.
Mm-hmm. Did that wanting to do it different, did that kind of evolve through your healing, or was that something in the back of your mind, even as a teenager, you thought, I want to do something different.
Oh, I think even as a teenager, I knew I will never make my daughter feel like this
Yeah.
or my child someday. Like this is not a healthy. And I think just because my parents got divorced when I was 8 years old, I was like, that's not going to be my story. Like I'm going to find a way, I'm going to wait to marry the right person. And I didn't know what that looked like. I mean,
Yeah.
it was, you don't really know, but I think there again, I mean, totally like my relationship with Christ and letting him heal those places in me, and you become aware of what your worth is and what a healthy marriage. And I was, fortunate enough to be around older people at that stage of my life in college where I was like, oh, this is what a good relationship looks like. This is what a good marriage looks like. So
Yeah. As Caroline grew and you had her in your life, did you think back, oh my gosh, my mom did this, and this is what I know I'm doing. This is because I love her so much.
yeah,
This young girl.
I mean, I think with Caroline, it was almost like my reaction was so, for a while, I think my biggest problem is I was so determined to not be my mom
Yeah.
that I was like, I put so much pressure on myself I'm going to be this
Uh-huh.
perfect mother. I'm going to do it all right. I'm never going to let her down. I'm never going to fail her. I'm going to make sure that she doesn't feel an ounce of discomfort in her life. And you and I both know that is
Yeah.
absolutely, bless my heart, that is absolutely impossible because nobody's going to be a perfect parent. Nobody's going
No.
to do it. You can't protect your child from everything. We're not meant to protect our kids from everything. So I think there was a lot in me that had to really learn how to surrender and to trust God to give
Yeah.
me the wisdom and discernment to know how to walk that road, that it wasn't in my strength, but it was in his strength for me to be able to do that.
And knowing it's okay to not be perfect.
That's right. It's okay. And Caroline's my only child, so I only had one, but I look at my friends who had multiple, and what we all know is every kid is different.
Yeah.
So the only way you're going to know how to really parent each of your children effectively is to trust God to give you the wisdom and discernment to know how to do that.
Yeah.
Because different kids are going to need different things from you.
They are. It reminds me of a family I worked with a few years ago, and there were 3 daughters, and I worked with the youngest. First 2 daughters were apparently just perfect. I
Uh-huh.
mean, they didn't anything wrong. This third daughter, they had no idea what to do with her because
Yeah.
she was just kind of a free spirit and stuff like that. And I remember them sitting there with me as before I met with their daughter, and they said, "We don't know what's wrong with her.
Yeah.
We're doing the same thing we did others do, and they came out
Mm-hmm.
perfect." So I think that is it helped me see, and this probably was earlier in my career when that happened actually, that yeah, every child is so different,
Yeah.
and you can't have this cookie cutter pattern
Mm-mm.
that works for everyone.
No,
Yeah,
because different personalities, different temperaments, that different ways that they feel love from you, different ways they feel
yeah,
seen. And it's like, I think that's such the tricky thing of how do you give them all what they need?
absolutely. And there's not this perfect formula, but that
No,
God has a perfect formula for that child.
that's absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so cool. I love
Yeah.
that. So you talk about pushing kids to be a better versions of ourselves, or attempting to live
Hmm.
through them, and that's contrary to what God intends for parents. Let's talk a little bit about that because I think that's a really important.
Yeah. I mean, I think as parents, we all have this tendency. Our kids' success feels like our success. If our kids are thriving and they're doing great, I mean, it's the reason that you got the bumper stickers that say my kid's on the honor roll at whatever. We want to, and we're proud of our kids. But I also think you see like, I mean, our daughter played soccer and she was a great soccer player. And we did club and the travel and all that stuff. But I'm like, it's gotten so intense. And I'm like, it's so parent driven because how much of it is that our kids really want to play soccer or baseball 7 days a week? And how much of it is us wanting to have them have the success because that feels like an indicator of our success,
Yeah,
and I think that we try to live vicariously through them. And that looks like academic success and sports success and having tons of friends and all that stuff. But it's like, I think what happens is we can lose, like, what are we really creating? Do I want to
mhm,
raise a great athlete or do I want to raise a great person?
right.
So are we valuing, like, are they compassionate? Are we teaching them empathy? Are they kind? Are they following Christ? Like, are we putting value and showing them the real value is in sometimes these intangible things that there's no bumper sticker for? Or,
Right.
or is
Right.
it just all that this is what matters, is if you're the top of your class, if you're the captain of this team, and all of those things are never going to bring them fulfillment and are not ultimately going to make them a great person.
No, no, there isn't a bumper sticker that I've seen that
No.
says, "My child is kind."
Yes, yeah, yeah. My child sat next to the person with no friends at lunch. There's not that bumper sticker.
No, and you don't get recognized for
Mm-mm.
that very much. Maybe every once in a while a teacher will say something, but yeah, and I think our culture, we put those things up as what we want for our kids
Yeah,
because our culture tells us they need to be a good athlete or they need to be academic or be
yeah,
good in music or something that was so we can put that bumper sticker on,
yeah.
which I think I don't know. What do you think, Mel? The balance there to encourage them in what they're good at, but also to let them know what's really important in life.
Yeah. And I think that's it. Is it's like, what are we pushing? Because I think it's okay to teach our kids to be competitive and, in
Sure.
sports, and you want them to, excel at whatever they do, and you want them to try hard. But you also have to balance that between, let's always remember the most important thing is I want you to be a good teammate. I don't need you to always have the winning run. I need to know that you're a good teammate and that you're cheering on your friends. And just to emphasize both of those things, because I think they can coexist if you do it in a healthy way.
Caroline being in soccer, I had a son that was in soccer, and we did all the kind of that stuff too. And a lot of the parents didn't look at things the way we did.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I saw my son Grant get influenced a lot by that and
Mm-hmm.
by his friends that were parents were just driving for all of this. How did you communicate to Caroline, help her walk through that? Because I think that's hard for a kid.
Yeah. I think it's really hard because I think so many of these sports, especially in travel, like we used to always say, the thing about soccer is the higher levels we played in, it really became less about you winning as a team as it did about, a college coach seeing your individual
Right.
success, so as long as you looked good. And so,
Yep.
we would deal with these teams where like you would have the girl that never wanted to pass the ball to you because she's trying to score herself. And, we would just always look for opportunities to point that out to Caroline and say, this is not what you do. Like this, it's not about your individual success. Like it's about lifting up the people around you. It's about giving other people a chance to succeed. It's about finding ways to treat each other with kindness. And I mean, I just
Mhm.
think you have to look for times to impart those lessons,
Yeah.
and just kind of, it's an ongoing conversation. I mean, that's, kids are, sometimes they're listening to us, sometimes they're not.
Right.
They have the memory of a goldfish. So, I mean, I think you have to repeat those things over and over again and say, did you see the way this person acted today? Like, we're not going to do that. That's not how we're going to treat
So good.
people,
Yeah, because in many ways it's countercultural.
Oh, it's totally. Because I mean, I think the culture tells you it's all about you. It's about your opportunities. It's about your achievements. It's about your thing. And, and we've always had conversations with Caroline where I'm like, and we live in a neighborhood that is fairly affluent and people are successful and they're good
Uh-huh.
at what they're doing. But we're like, but do you see how you're also able to see in that the people who are still miserable, like they've achieved all these things that the world says are success, but they're still empty because what does their soul look like? What are they
Yeah.
feeding? What are they valuing? And because all those other accomplishments, I mean, it's a fleeting moment of satisfaction and feeling good, and then it's on to the next thing.
Then it's gone.
And it's
Yeah.
gone.
Can't remember what the movie was, but it was the reporter that was interviewing J. Paul Getty, and he asked him how much money's enough, and Getty
Mm-hmm.
goes, "More." And
Yeah.
and so if you get on that track, you're never going to be happy
Mm-mm.
because
No.
you're trying to get something that's not. You're after something that isn't going to make you happy.
That's it. And I think some of the most miserable people in the world are the people who've achieved everything that the world tells them they should have achieved to be happy, and they realize they're still not happy
Yeah,
because then what? You know?
exactly. Yeah,
I mean, then what?
and then you're still searching, and if you don't find God and you
Yeah.
don't see what He really has for us, yeah, it's really sad to see people like that,
Mm-hmm.
honestly. But,
It is.
and I've seen it a number of times. People
Oh, I
that have
bet.
on the outside, everybody think, "My gosh, that everything in the world that they
That's
want,"
it.
but
Uh-huh.
inside, because I've worked with them in counseling, I know their marriage is falling apart.
Yeah.
And I know that all the stuff that they've accumulated and that car they're driving that I'm envious of
Yeah.
didn't make a difference
Mm-mm.
in the big
Mm-mm.
picture.
Yeah. That's it.
So what tangible choice did you make to fight the things that you were taught or shown about motherhood?
I think first of all, is I always, from the time I got pregnant, even before I got pregnant, Caroline was so prayed over, and my journey into motherhood. I mean, I prayed so hard that I would be an intentional mother, and that God
Mhm.
would give me the wisdom to parent her the way that he created her to be. And that was a big thing for me, is
Yeah.
I felt like my childhood, so much of it was, I just tried to mold myself into whatever I felt like would make my mom happy in the moment. I was like a little shapeshifter. I would try to keep everybody happy and make everything magic. And to me, one of the biggest choices I made with Caroline was like, I want to raise her and celebrate her and let her be exactly who God created her to be. That it's not going to be about my agenda for her life. It's not going to be about what I think that her life should look like or who she should be. And I think early on, I mean, I talk about Caroline because I was a girl. And so when I was having a girl, I was like, well, I know about girls. Well, I was a girly girl. I mean, I loved my dresses and my bows and my Barbie dolls and all of that stuff. And Caroline was very different. I mean, she just never really had a use for any of that. I mean, I'm like, her favorite toy was a Steve Irwin crocodile hunter action doll that she like carried around. She didn't really care about Barbies. And so in a way, it was so entertaining because I was like, oh, she's so different than what I thought she would be. I mean, I put her in dance classes and she was like, I don't want to be
Yeah.
in dance. This is not my thing. And so that's how we found soccer. But it was like, she was a little more rough and tumble, but it was like to embrace those things about her instead
Yeah.
of just trying to mold her into what I thought she should look like.
Yeah, that's really cool. And that we're able to do that.
Yeah.
I think what we try to do is expose our kids to a number of different things and let them settle into what they liked. And I know we didn't do it perfect. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure
No.
I was influenced sometimes by other dads and
Oh,
saying,
yeah.
push a little bit and realizing, you're pushing a little too hard there
Mm-hmm.
in those
And it's
situations.
hard. I mean, when you see
Yeah.
them, I mean, I think, with soccer, I mean, we've gone back to Carolina and been like, hey, there were times we were probably a little too intense. Like we got a little too invested, and that's part of the trial and error. But I think also as a parent, there's something in having the humility to go to your kids and say, you know what, we did the best we could, but we kind of got that wrong. So
Because
sorry.
there comes a time that they know that anyway.
Yeah,
And I
exactly.
think it helps them for us to verbalize it to them like
Yeah.
that. You talked about a lot of work that you did for healing before Caroline, but
hmm
how your relationship with her, how has that continued to bring healing just by having her and being able to do things different?
I think there's something so it's funny because I think, you look at things in life that you wish would have been different. And like, would I have loved to have had a mom who we were super close and we had a great relationship and it was, I mean, I would have loved that. But guess what? That was never going to happen for me. That was never my story. So, but I think there's something so healing in getting to be the thing in somebody else's life that you wish you would have had in your own.
Mm,
It changes the narrative, so it's like, in a way, Caroline is so much redemption in my life because I
yeah.
didn't get to have that mother, but I'm getting to be that mother and I'm getting to have that close mother-daughter relationship as her mom. And so there's something so healing in that, to get to see the cycles that have been broken. And and she's 21 now, so it's she's fairly fully cooked, so I feel like
Yeah.
and just to see the choices that she's made for her life, and how proud I am of the way her faith is so important to her and the things that we've instilled in her. And I know that it's all the grace of God, but it's also where my husband and I have been so intentional in who we've raised her to be.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. And that she didn't have to go through the things you went through.
Yeah, that's
That
it.
there's the
Yeah.
redemption that came from that.
hmm
I love that. So you mentioned Perry.
Yeah.
You've also talked about a couple of people that you dated before then. Uh, what's the most significant differences you see between yourself in those relationships and when Perry came into your life?
I think when Perry came, here's what I'll say: God's timing is always perfect. You look and go, God was so sovereign in that, because by the time Perry came, I'd dated people, I'd had the broken engagement, and I didn't really know what I was looking for. But I also, at that time, my faith, I mean, I had gone back to a Bible study. I had really committed my life to Christ at that point. So I knew I want somebody who's going to follow Christ. I want
Yeah.
somebody who is going to prioritize faith. I knew those things. But I think the greatest gift is when Perry came into my life, and it was after I'd graduated from college. I was 23. And really, we just were friends first. I mean, a mutual friend said, y'all ought to hang out. We were both living in San Antonio. And so we laughed because we said we started hanging out because we didn't know anybody else. That was, but we really got to be friends. And there was something so sweet in the way God allowed that friendship to develop, because I felt so safe with Perry. And he really had become like one of my closest friends. So it wasn't like I had this crush on him and I was trying to be all these things. I didn't know that I was going to fall in love with him. So in my mind, I was like, well, I'm just going to tell this guy everything there is to know. I'm just going to be super real and transparent. And here's who I am. And, then the beauty of like, he was probably the first guy I'd ever done that with. And he fell in love with me and I fell in love with him, and it was just real, because neither one of us were trying to be anything other than what we were.
And just to see how God does things like that, and the timing, like you said, that was just perfect. And and I think, I tell people all the time when they're fall in love or have some other dating, I said, are you best friends? I mean, and I think Nancy and I went through that. I think we were best friends before we really fell in love. And we did kind of the same thing. We shared things, and neither one of us ran. And so I think, okay, maybe this is from God. So
that's it. Good. And I think there's just a sweetness, and it's like, and I've told my daughter, because now she's 21 and she's just trying to figure out the dating world. And I'm like, you can feel a spark with somebody initially. And I said, but a spark is just purely physical attraction at the end of the day. And I was like, look for the person that you feel like is kind and can be your friend and listens and values the same things you value. And, those are the things that last. Like, who makes you laugh? Who makes you feel good? Who builds you up? That's what you want.
That's so cool. I love that.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, so people are listening and watching this, and they're thinking, am I carrying generational trauma? How would you encourage them to assess that or identify? Were there some unhealthy things that they've accepted just as normal? What would be a first step from them?
I think the first thing is, I think you kind of have to do an honest assessment of are the things I'm carrying from childhood or my teenage years or from growing up in the home I grew up in, that I feel like I'm carrying things. Do I react to people out of fear or out of insecurity? Is this the root of something that's somewhere in my life? Because I think a lot of times what can happen, and I've seen it in people I've known, where it's like they came from not great childhoods and they had all this trauma. And what they've done is then they've managed to like get married and they've got their own family and they've just slapped a big Band-Aid on it. And then stuff starts to come out sideways because you haven't really healed anything. You've just put a Band-Aid on it. And so it's like, look for the places where you may feel a wound. Like, where do you feel? I mean, it's okay to look and go, you know what? My dad really let me down in this way. And this was a place where he didn't pour into me the way that he should have, or this is a way that my mom said these things and I still carry this. And this is why I feel insecure in my friendships or, in my relationships. I think it's okay to do. It can be uncomfortable to do a deep dive. I mean, I think sometimes uncovering the deeper sources, the roots of the pain, like anything, it hurts more. But I think there's real freedom in the healing that comes from realizing maybe this is why I respond the way that I do, or why I react to my kids the way I do.
Absolutely. And I'll get a plug in for Christian counselors. I think because I've had people, in fact, I had a lady not too long ago. We started working together and she said, there's something that's not right. And I want to figure out what it is. And we are, and she's being able to say some things and just being honest with the things that happen, because I think you're so right, Melanie. I think eventually it's going to come out some way.
Yeah, and I think the thing I'll say, and here's my plug for Christian counselors, is even, I had never gone to any kind of therapy or anything my whole life. And in the process of writing this book, it just kind of unearthed some feelings in me, and this is, I've been living from this place of feeling healed, and I've had this family and I've felt redemption, but I was like, I think there are some things I still need to kind of sort out and talk about. And I found a wonderful Christian therapist that I started going to. I'm like I always say writing this book sent me into therapy for the first time in my adult life. But there's something so beneficial about having somebody who isn't your friend, who is an unbiased person,
Right.
validate some of your experiences and what you've been through and to help you talk through it and process it. I think that's invaluable for people.
And I think someone that has the same values and faith as you do,
Yeah.
that they're going to respect that, and they're going to know that God has the answers, and that I don't have as a counselor, that my person I'm seeing doesn't have, but God does. And it's just letting him guide us into that.
That's it. Because that's ultimately the only, my husband always says we aren't that good with Jesus. So, how much do we need him? No, like.
Yes. Perry sounds like a great guy.
He's a great guy. He's a really good guy.
Awesome. So then you get this beautiful gift of closure with your mom. What's it like to look back on it all and see how God wove your experience into something that finally allowed really a peaceful goodbye with your mom?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I made the decision, and I talk about it in the book, that I made the decision to cut off the relationship with my mom, it had just gotten to the point where there was no moving forward. It was just continually toxic and getting increasingly toxic. And so, when I walked away, and I think you have to know, if you make the decision to walk away from a relationship like that, you have to know I may never get any kind of closure. I mean, I think in some ways closure is a myth. I mean, we like to think things get tied up in a nice big bow, but most of the time they don't. And so I made that decision, but with my mom, my younger sister had stayed in contact with her. And so she let me know that my mom had been diagnosed with a very aggressive form of sarcoma. And she said they're giving her a couple of weeks at the most. So I really prayed, like, should I go see her? Like, am I supposed to go see her? And what I kept saying to God was, but I have peace. Like, I'm at peace. Like, in my mind, I had already said that goodbye. And what I felt like God was putting on my heart was, this really isn't about your peace. This is about giving her peace. And I thought, I can do that. Like, I can do that. And I was scared to do it. I mean, I didn't know what it was going to look like, but I thought, I'm just going to go, and it's going to be what it's going to be. And it actually was a really peaceful, beautiful moment where, my mom, and whether it was the morphine or the Holy Spirit, you can decide. But she said to me, sometimes it just takes time to work things out. And it just felt like that was the best way she could have told me that on some level she understood the decision that I had made. And there was something really powerful about that.
How many years had passed since you had seen her?
14.
Oh, wow.
14 years.
Long time.
So, long time.
Yeah, it's interesting how God prompts us, because I can do the same thing. If you're, I don't really need to do that, God, I'm fine.
Yeah.
And then he says, but you do need to do that. And it sounds like it was a good experience overall for you.
Yeah, no, it really was. It was a good thing to do. And that doesn't mean that that's a thing that everybody needs to do or should do.
Exactly.
For me, it was a great, beautiful moment.
Yeah, that's awesome. So the book's about fighting generational trauma. What about generational legacy?
I mean, I think your generational legacy, I mean, wow, what a thing to be able to, it's like, if I've been able to raise a daughter, if we can raise our kids to go, here are the things that are important: your faith, your family, the way you treat the world around you. Are you the hands and feet of Jesus in your business place, in your life, in your family, all those things? I'm like, that's the legacy that I want to leave. It's like, I mean, I hope that someday when I'm gone, Caroline, her memory of me will be, my mom was not perfect, but she always pointed me to Jesus. She always did the best she could to encourage me and love me and who I was. And I'm like, if you create that legacy and you raise these healthy kids, and it's, what did I just see? I saw a thing the other day. I thought it was so good. It was a quote, and I actually ordered it, but it was like, if the roots are healthy, or something like, if the root is holy, then the branches will be healthy.
Oh, that's cool.
And I was like, man, that's what I want my legacy to be, is that our roots have been so grounded in Christ and who he is, that our legacy will be, this is what my parents' marriage looked like. And so I hope that Caroline is going to, and I feel confident that she will, that she's going to choose a good partner because of what she's seen modeled for her, and that she'll model that. And then hopefully
Yeah.
her kids someday will see this is the legacy, and I think there's something powerful in
Oh, I
what
do
you
too.
create going forward.
Because some people don't do what you did, and some people keep the legacy. That trauma legacy continues,
That's right.
and
That's right.
we've got to break that. And I just
Yeah.
admire you so much that you were able to do that and went
Well,
through that, because it's not easy.
it's not easy, but but I think God gives you the grace to do it
Agree.
if you ask him,
I
and I
do.
think you have to be willing to take those steps. But I think God has been so faithful to walk me, and I think baby steps. I mean, I think it wasn't like this huge transformation. It was just, hey, just take the next step, and I think he'll give you the strength to do that and confront some hard things and some difficult things if you'll be open enough to do that.
I love the way you said that, because I think sometimes we say if we invite God in, it's gonna explode all over the place.
Yeah,
But my experience is that God takes us that baby steps, a step at a time,
I
and He
agree.
knows what we can handle and what we can't at that time, and to
Hmm.
know that He's there with us through every step of it.
That's it. That's it. We're
Really.
never going to do it alone.
So as people read the book, what
Hmm.
would you want them to take away from Here Be Dragons?
I think my biggest thing is there's nothing so broken that God can't redeem it.
Mm,
And that I think God is true in his word where he says that he gives us beauty for ashes. And I think no matter what the ashes of your life look like, no matter what feels like it is burned down, no matter what feels like it's too dead to live, I think he can redeem anything if we will trust him with that. And I hope that my book, and I feel like from, hearing, it's been out now for a while, and hearing people's responses, it's like, I feel seen. This brought healing. This brought some encouragement. I feel less alone. And I think that's the thing is I'm like, there's so many of us out there walking around with these wounds from childhood or trauma and all of that. And sometimes I think we can feel really alone in it because we don't know how to talk about it. So I hope my book gives people a space to kind of process some of those things for themselves and know that they're not alone in it.
yeah, absolutely. And I think what you said earlier, that it may have been something that was not a big a deal, as like what you went through. I would encourage everybody to read the book,
Well,
because
thank you.
I
Thank
think
you.
all of us have been through things, and some of us were able to deal with it, or some of us had parents like I did, that if they made a mistake, they were so good about acknowledging it, apologizing for it,
Hmm.
and that alone bring healing. But I think, yeah, I think it's powerful. I think it'd
Yeah.
be
Thank you.
yeah, it's so good.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So the book is available everywhere,
It
and if they
is.
want to find you, it's the best place, the book website or your website.
Probably my Instagram is where I am most days. I feel
Okay.
like I've moved almost everything to Instagram. I'm Melanie Shankle on Instagram. You can find me there. There's book stuff there. I write some stuff there. I post my dogs and dumb stuff there. So, you can
Just a little bit of everything
a
then.
little bit of
Yeah, I
everything,
get
all
it.
of the above.
That's really good. So what you got anything coming up next that people can be looking forward to? Or are you
You
just
know,
kind of
I'm,
rest it
I'm,
all?
well, I'm not working on a book currently. I will say that my daughter Caroline has written a book of her own, and it's almost like a hand in hand with my book, but hers is going to be called The Lion and the Bear, and it's a 100-day devotional for
Oh,
young
wow.
women. And she wrote about it just based on kind of her experience with dealing with mean girls in high school and the things that God's taught her. And it's really powerful. So that is actually coming out in October
In
of this
October.
year.
Okay. That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, so I'm super excited for her for that. And then I have a weekly podcast called the Big Boo Cast that I do with my friend
Yeah.
Sophie Hudson. And there again, it's a lot of everything. There's
Just
some faith, there's some nonsense. If you need a new lipstick, we try to cover all the bases.
just good conversation between
That's
two
it.
really good friends.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
really
that's about
great.
it.
What
So
what about you and Perry? What's the best thing in your marriage right now?
oh man, I think we're now we've been empty nesters for almost 4 years. I mean,
Yeah.
Caroline's about to graduate from college, but I think the thing is there's something, you worry so much about these years, but I think there's something, embrace the empty
Yeah.
nest years. Like we really, as we've settled in, we really, it's like we really enjoy each other. And so I think it's just kind of the day to day, when we both get to we're at a stage in life, we both get to do a lot of things that we love doing. And some of those things are apart and some of them are together. And
Yeah.
it's kind of fun to have this freedom, So if you find yourself on the precipice of that and feel scared, don't worry. It's all good days are still ahead.
No, I agree. It was one of those things. And I think Nancy may have dreaded it a little more than I did. But when our
Mhm.
daughter left home, and it was like, wow, we do have this freedom. And we
Yeah,
had done a lot of things good that prepared us for it. And it's a great stage of life.
it
And you
is.
haven't hit the grandkids yet, but that's another stage that is just pretty fun.
Yeah, I
So,
know. I can't wait. I'm watching a couple of my friends have kind of started on that path, and I'm like, man, that looks like fun. All the fun and none of the responsibility.
yes, exactly. Send them home.
Yeah, exactly. They're your problem now.
Exactly. Well, this has been so good, Melanie. Thank you for spending time. Encourage people to pick up the book, Here Be Dragons,
Thank you.
and to follow you on the podcast and find her on Instagram and look at all the things she's got going right now.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. What a great conversation.
Thank you.
Have a good
Bye.
day.